Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night. Hey there, believers. I got a great episode for you this week. Today, I'm bringing on Robin, and she has what seems to be a lifetime of experiences. Um, Looking at the email, looks like it goes back to 1975 up until the last couple of years. So there's a whole lot going on here, and we'll just see what kind of tapestry it weaves as we get through it. I want to say thank you to everybody for all the love and support. Please feel free to give a 5-star rating and review to the show wherever you listen to the podcast. And let's help this show to grow as much as possible. We're getting close to Christmas time. It's a great time of year. It's the most wonderful time of year I've heard. And it's an exciting time, to be with family and friends and loved ones. And if you know somebody that's going without their family, friends, or loved ones this year, reach out to them. Okay, just give them a little bit of love. To treat people how we want to be treated, that's what it's all about. Yeah, this episode looks like it's going to get into maybe a Ouija board experience, maybe disembodied voices. Who knows? There's a lot going on here in this email, and we've talked and scheduled this out quite a ways away. So I'm excited to go ahead and get into it. I'm still transitioning. I just got off work. I got home 30 minutes ago, and I'm going to church here in 2 hours. And I'm trying to do this in between. So I got to center myself, get my focus where it needs to be, and get going. If you have an experience that you would like to share, holler at me. It's at thebumppodcast@gmail.com. That is the best way to get through to me. If you and I have talked before, and maybe on Instagram or TikTok or something like that, and messages have fallen off, email me. I don't mean to not keep in touch with you. There's a big influx of emails and scheduling going on right now, and that's a great and wonderful thing. It's just a very busy time of year. For example, and I'm going to share this with you because I tend to share with my buddies here. You guys are my friends, right? Please be my friend. An example of what busy is in 3 days, my father is getting remarried, and we get to decorate and help put on that wedding, and it's such a blessing. I'm so excited for my dad and his wife. Yeah, this is just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So by the time this airs, they will have been married. So big congrats to my dad, Kip. I'm just over the moon, excited for him. He turned 70 at the end of the year, and it's a fresh start. It's a beautiful, man. I'm stoked. But we are running around like crazy. Here we are 3 days out, and we're still trying to book a place to have a small reception after. So, here we go. All right. I'll quit rambling maybe, and we'll bring on Robin. All right. You got it?
Yes, I do.
All right. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Robin, I was going through the email, and I didn't know if you wanted to go chronologically or if you wanted to just hit whatever you wanted to talk about. But the first thing I saw in there was when you were 5 years old, you saw this shadow in church.
Yes. So, I did not go to church. I grew up, I think I would say the first 10 years, I never went to church. My mom they were not religious. Um, had no idea, but I lived in Southern California and I was 5 years old. And yes, us Gen Xers, we were feral.
Yeah.
We were let to go to do whatever we wanted to do. If I wasn't out in the orange groves with my BB gun shooting lizards off of rocks, we were getting into some mischief at 5, 6 years old. But across the street from our house was this church, and I don't know the denomination, what it was. But we'd kind of get into some um, mischief. And I remember late one night, we went, me and my younger sister. So I'm 5'6". She's only like 4'5". Well, she's almost 2 years younger than me. So 3, 4.
Yeah.
um, we went across the street. We did have another neighbor girl. Her name was Bobby. And I think there might have been another neighbor kid who was right around our age. And we went across the street to the church. And we had opened, we just kind of were checking the doors, and we did. We found a door that was unlocked, and we went in, and we just kind of, wandered around the church. And once you go into the sanctuary, now at this time I didn't know what a sanctuary was. I had never really, honestly, this was probably the first time I'd ever been into a church. I didn't know what they did there, but I remember going in, and we were in the sanctuary, and up above, there was kind of a mezzanine area where they did. I'm assuming that's because it looked like there was a lot of audio recording equipment, those little audio boards and stuff. I'm not an audio person, so I don't really understand that stuff. But they had a lot of equipment up there, and I remember looking up there and seeing this dark shadow, and it was in the shape similar of a human being, kind of moving back and forth. And us kids, we kind of freaked out a little bit. We're like, what's this? Because we don't see any specific details of a person, and we are just kind of freaked out. And we saw it going back and forth. It didn't seem like it was coming towards us or coming down or being I guess, antagonizing, anything like that. So we kind of freaked out. We're little kids. We freaked out, screamed, ran out. But we actually went back. I guess we wanted to see it again. So we went back. I don't know how long. I mean, this is over 50 years ago.
Right.
So, well, right around 50 years ago. So we went back in again, and we saw it again. And it was very disturbing. And apparently, I mean, I'm looking back on it, I'm thinking, wow, this church just doesn't lock their doors, because we never actually broke in. It was just we tried a door and it's unlocked.
Right.
And this is, I'm going to say, 1975, 76. And so we've seen it a couple of times. I would say maybe 2 or 3 times. And that was my first experience of ever being in a church, not even really knowing what a church was.
Right.
But we saw this dark figure moving back and forth, and it wasn't a person. We didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
We were just very scared. Apparently not too scared, because as I said, we went back. Um, so, my thing is, though, is all of the experiences that I've ever had, I've been startled. I've been, I guess, scared, but it's never been like I was in fear for my life.
Right.
I don't know. There's always been a feeling that I was protected in some way, kind of like I'm not afraid that it's going to come after me. I'm scared more because I'm seeing something that's very odd to see. It's not something that you're going to see every single day.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was my first experience, I would say, with seeing something paranormal, supernatural, whatever. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't tell my mom this stuff. My mom was very um oh, just not present. I mean, physically there, she was, she was there. But and I don't want anybody to feel like I'm ever in during this talk, I may say some things about my mother, she's passed on a little over 4 years ago. She she did her best. I absolutely love her. She had me at 16,
Wow.
and I
Yeah.
believe she kind of stopped maturing at that age. And I learned that very on. And so I never had any ill feelings towards her. She did what her mental capacity could do. So, I didn't really talk to my mom too much about things growing up.
Yeah. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. And like you said, Gen X, we my mom to this day probably doesn't know everywhere I went when I was a kid. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we went a lot of places and didn't know. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah.
Um, it was around that same time on this email, and I don't mean to leave this for you, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, I was like the freakiest one that I saw right off the bat was this green hand incident, and I wanted you to tell me about that too.
Okay, so
And
that one's a very quick incident. So I was so first off, a lot of my experiences, I'm going to know kind of around what years they happened, only because of the fact that growing up, I moved around a lot. My mom, we moved back and forth between two states every year. I mean, I think I counted it out. I've been to 14 different schools. I've lived in at least 44 homes that I can count, that I can remember. So
wow,
that's how I can remember. My mom, we moved a lot. Um, she was a hippie, so we never stayed in one place too long. And then of course I ended up marrying a military man,
yeah,
and we moved every few years too. So that one, I was 7 years old, I remember. I lived in Southern California. And I don't even remember the name of my girlfriend. I was invited to her house for the weekend for a sleepover. Um, so I'm gonna say first, first grade, second grade. And it was in, I do remember she lived in Apple Valley, California, and I went to her house. And so back then there was this game that little kids played, little girls played, not so much boys. It was that hand clapping game. Um, you know, um, Down by the shores, certain little hand clapping games. We're sitting on her bed and we're doing this hand clapping game, and all of a sudden this green hand came out from her head, like where her she didn't have a headboard on her bed, but the wall that her head was, the head of her bed was on,
yeah,
it came out and in between our hands. It just went in between our hands as we're clapping, and both of us just screamed and jumped off the bed and ran to her parents. I ended up going home, and that was it. So it was a very short time. I hadn't really I don't even know if I've told my mom about that. I mean, I may have, because she might have asked, like, why are you home a day early?
mm,
I do remember coming home early because that was very weird that it happened. So I
yeah,
don't know anything about her home. I don't even remember the girl's name. But it stuck with me that, I'm sitting here playing this cute little innocent clapping game, and this green hand, it wasn't hairy or anything, but it did have this green tint to it. And it just came straight out of the wall in between our hands. And then we freaked out and left.
yeah. When you were clapping, did you touch that green hand?
I don't remember it. I don't remember it. I don't know if it was a solid. I don't remember. Honestly, to tell you the truth, I don't think it was solid. Because I don't remember touching anything physical. We're doing our thing, and I think it was more of just kind of a well, not solid.
Yeah,
So it just came through. It was very weird. So as I said, I don't know if I said it in the email, that a lot of my experiences are just really quick, quick things. I have a lot of them. And it's not like anything ongoing, not like I've lived in one house for 20 years and I've had this ongoing paranormal thing.
Right.
Um, and so, and I don't know if a lot of stuff that I've ever had was tied to any home or if it's just something with me.
It's interesting though. That's
Hmm.
that's pretty freaky, and I would imagine I would
Hmm.
probably go home too if that
Yeah,
if
yeah,
that happened.
I was, it was very weird. I'd never experienced anything like that, a hand. I didn't think any, and I was, like I said, I was 7 years old. Um, and then shortly after that, so I'm going to try to go chronologically.
Okay.
So I think I was still 7 and we moved to Minnesota. And right before I turned 8, I had gotten pretty sick. Not horrible, but it must have been like a flu or something. And we were living with my uncle and his wife, because we had just moved there. And so I remember laying on their sofa, my uncle and aunt's sofa, and I had a fever. And you can, I guess, maybe chalk it up to being feverish. I don't know. And I just remember laying there and feeling this almost like an energy bubble around me. I didn't quite understand it. I felt um, that I was in this energy bubble. And it was strange to me because I would push my hand out, but it felt like I was pushing against something. I felt like I was confined, but I was just laying on the sofa. And I kept pushing my hand out. And I remember my mom looking at me and she's saying, Robin, what are you doing? And I just looked at her and I said, well, I can't move, but I'm pushing my hand out and there's this bubble. And I think she said something along the lines of, well, you're just not feeling well. Just lay down and rest. And, my mom was very, in a lot of ways, dismissive, not because she didn't love me, but I think it was, she didn't have the explanations for a lot of things. And I didn't know exactly what was happening.
Right.
So it was almost like I was in this energy bubble trying to push out of it and I couldn't get out of it. I'm not pushing like my whole body out of it, but I'm pushing my hand up against it and I'm feeling this oh my gosh, I can't really explain it. This pushback. It's not letting me push my hand through it. And then I guess I just went back to sleep. So, but I do remember her, her saying, just you're fine. It was just odd. That's something that always stuck with me,
Yeah.
but
I
I felt that.
looking back at it now, do you have any idea of what that could have been?
I don't know. Oh, I hate saying the word but I remember being a teenager and I had watched, I don't even know what I was watching. And they said something about, creating an energy field yourself and moving your hands around. And I remember trying that at one time. And at that time, I did. I kind of moved my hands because I was very curious as a kid. In my teens as well, I would try different things. And I would move my hands kind of like I'm creating this little energy ball. And it was almost kind of like that. It felt very similar to that. Like, when you're moving your hands around, you're trying to create this thing, you're trying to manifest something, and you feel this little ball, I would say an energy ball in your hands. And it was almost similar to that. So that's how I kind of felt that that might be it, but I'm not positive. I mean, I look back on a lot of stuff and I think, did I just imagine all that? Was it a dream? Was it just my imagination? Because when I was younger, I did have a very big imagination. I loved reading. And so any books I got into, I felt, I really got myself into those books.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think we all had that in us when we were kids.
Yeah.
It's part of the fun of being a kid. Letting your imagination
Oh,
run wild.
absolutely.
But that sounds like something more. Like you were maybe unaware, but
Hmm.
experiencing something. supernatural there,
Yes. Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
All
Hmm.
right. So where do we go from here?
Well, let's see. Like I said, I did try to write things down chronologically, and then I just kind of goofed, trying to write a lot of things down. Um, so there is one thing too. I mean, my memory goes back to, now I don't remember a whole lot, but my memory does go back to being under 1 years old. Um, there's again.
Hmm.
So I remember talking with my mother, and this was probably about 10 years ago. And I asked her, I said, "Hey, mom, was I ever on a double decker airplane?" And she says, "Oh, you would never remember that." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, I have a memory or a dream of me being on a double decker airplane. You and I went on it, and the back then the stewardess picked me up and took me around and walked me around this plane. And she says, "There's no way you can remember that. You weren't even a year old." And I'm like, "Well, I remember it." And so I'm like, "Wow, that's amazing." And I said, "Well, what about this other one? I have a memory of sitting in a playpen." And so this is, I would say, 1970, and sitting in a playpen, sitting in a kitchen and looking up. And she's like, "There's no way you can remember that. You were probably maybe 9 months old." And so, there are things that I have very good memory on. A long-term memory. My short-term memory, due to some medications over the last 20 years, have messed up some of my short-term memory. But I do have a memory. I'm not sure if it's a memory or not. It's so in 1975, I was in kindergarten. And I don't really remember too much in kindergarten other than we had to take naps. And I had the morning, I at the morning they always, cut it to morning kindergarten, afternoon kindergarten, morning kindergarten, we had to take naps. And so I do remember laying down and taking a nap. And I remember laying there, and I have always, all my life, had a problem with falling asleep. I just cannot fall asleep as easily as some people. They can lay down, they're asleep in 5 minutes. It usually takes me forever. I never really slept in kindergarten. I remember laying there, and I had my teacher, Mrs. Lyons, and I didn't remember any of this stuff until probably this year. But it came in a dream, and I couldn't remember, and so I couldn't ask my mom anything about it because she'd since passed on. But I asked my aunt, and I said, "Hey, has mom ever mentioned anything about me being in kindergarten?" And she says, "No, I don't remember anything about that. But I remember I started having dreams that I'm in kindergarten. I'm laying on the mat. My teacher's walking around with there's one gentleman, there's another gentleman by the classroom door, and he's in a suit. He's in a dark black suit. There's another gentleman with him, and they're walking around and just looking at all the kids taking a nap. And I'm laying there with my eyes closed because, she's telling me, "You got to take a nap, Robin." And so I'm laying there, but I keep my eyes slightly open, and they're walking around, and this man in a black suit, and he's looking, and he stops in front of me, and she says, "No, not her. She's too difficult." And so, and that was it on that. But I don't remember ever going to my mom and telling her this experience. It was only this past year that I've started having this dream of that happening. And I'm like, "Well, I don't remember that at the time. What I do remember is a teacher parent conference where my mom goes and she's talking with the teacher, Mrs. Lyons, and Mrs. Lyons says, "Well, Robin has a problem with um, drawing outside the lines. She's difficult." And so that has always stuck with me. I'm like, why would that stick with you? For 50 years, why would that stick with somebody? She's difficult. And I honestly, I mean, if you'd ever met my mom, she'd always say Robin was the easiest one of the bunch. I was always very, very accommodating to her. I didn't give her any trouble, not like my younger sisters may have. So being called difficult, and so I could not understand why she would say something like that. And I didn't. Then I started thinking, why were these men in the room walking around and looking at the children and saying no, not, and she says no, not this one, this one's difficult. And so I didn't know what she meant by difficult for him. So that has kind of piqued my curiosity, I guess. I wasn't quite sure exactly why that would be. um so that's that on that age. And then I think if I can get a lot of the other stuff didn't happen until I would say 12, 11, or actually 11 o'clock, or I'm sorry, 11 years old. I had gone to, okay, Bible camp. Now, the how I started going to church was my mom had a girlfriend that lived in this duplex. She lived above it, and below it there was this childless couple, great couple. They didn't have any children. I would say they were in their maybe late 20s, early 30s. And I don't know, I kind of think that they may have felt a little sad for me and my sisters. um so I guess they got to talking to my mom, and they were very religious, and they said, "Hey, would it be okay if we took Robin and her sister to church with us on Sundays?" And so my mom's like, "Yeah, sure." And I'm like, "What these?" And I'm thinking back, I'm like, "These people are strangers, and you're just letting your kid go with them." And so my sister and I, my younger sister and I, were almost 2 years apart. We started going to church with them. They were a wonderful couple. They really were. And they, I do remember being baptized at, I think, 11 years old. It was 11 or 12. And it was a little odd. It was in the basement of another family's home in a horse's trough. I'm like, well, whatever you got to use, anything that would hold a lot of water, that'll do. But they also paid for me and my sister to go to Bible camp down in southern Minnesota. And so we had gone to the Bible camp, and I remember we were gone for it's about a week-long camp. And so it was shower time, and the shower room was this, I would say maybe 10 by 15-foot room with a bunch of shower heads on it. The second I walked into it, I just started getting anxious. I did not like being in there. I've always been a very modest person. I didn't want to undress in front of other people, but this was beyond that. This was just kind of freaking out. I did not want to do this. And so I don't think I showered that first time. I think a couple of days later, they did talk me into showering. And so I did shower. And so that was, I'm going to say fifth grade, sixth grade. And so that's done and over with. And that's during the summer. But then when school starts, we start learning about the Holocaust, the World War II, and they show a picture of the I'm going to I guess the gas chambers, people being led into some gas. I started having anxiety problems immediately, and I had to go to the nurse's office. And as soon as I saw that, I immediately thought, that's like the showers at camp. And I didn't have any horrible experiences at camp. I loved Bible camp. It was wonderful. So that was very, very odd for me to have those experiences. Now, years later, I did have some type of a reading, and they did say that I apparently died in, a past life. If you believe in those things, that a past life was in World War II and had passed away in a situation regarding that.
Now,
If that's something you believe in, I don't know. At this point in my life, I think anything's possible. Who knows? But I really did like going to church. I did like that. And so I really started praying a lot. Well, the second year of Bible camp, so during the second summer, learned a little bit more, still not a whole lot. I just enjoyed being at camp, really loved it. But then right after we got back from camp, we had gone to Southern California because at this point we were living in Minnesota, went to Southern California to visit family. Then we had a lot of the family ended up going down to Mexico. And we're in Mexico and we're staying at this house. I'm thinking the house was owned by family friends. Um, and so we're at the house. I ended up falling asleep in the sun, got really bad sunburnt. And so the next day, everybody wanted to go into town. I didn't want to. I didn't feel good. I'm like, I'm going to stay here. There were a couple of other adults that stayed with me. So I'm 12 years old at the time. And so they're in town. I'm the only kid left at the house. And I'm trying to find something to do. Well, they had this old wardrobe and I open it up and there was a Ouija board. And I've heard of Ouija boards before. I'd never touched one. And so I took it out. And so I started asking a couple of questions. And so my mom's youngest sibling, she had gotten married a little over a year earlier, I think, about a year earlier, and she was pregnant with her first, and everybody's all excited that, Aunt Jay's going to have her first baby. And so I'm there and I'm asking questions and I said, oh, is the baby going to be a boy or a girl? And it went to boy. And the baby was due around my birthday, a few months later, I would say. So this was August. So my birthday was going to be a few months later. And it kept going to DIE. And I was getting
ooh,
very kind of freaked out about it. So I just put it away and I didn't give it another thought. And so a few months later, we find out my new cousin's born. And it's a little boy and he's wonderful. And then or I think it was 4 days later on my 13th birthday, I come home from school and my mom's not home, but one of her friends is at the house. And I said, hey, where's mom? And she's like, well, she's on her way to California. My cousin just passed away, my new baby cousin. So he passed away on my 13th birthday. And so I thought I did this. I did this. It's my thought, or I mean, it's a 12, 13-year-old thought.
yeah, it would be.
It's your kid because I messed with something. So every night I prayed, and this is going to make me a little weepy, but every night I prayed, bring him back and take me. And so for a year, every single night I prayed that, and he didn't. God didn't grant that prayer. Thankfully, I mean, it's always God's will.
Right.
And there's a reason, for things to happen and stuff. So it was really hard. And I'd never told anybody that story. Last year I told one of my sisters it. And she didn't seem to be, too not like, oh my gosh, how crazy. I love her dearly, but she is one that doesn't like to hear a lot of differing things. Like, I don't want to hear that. So, but she's the only other person that I'd told that to. And so it was really difficult because for years, I really thought my teenage years, I thought it was my fault. And so I never touched another one of those Ouija boards again
Yeah, no doubt.
until I was almost 20 years old and was newly married and I lived in Northern California at the time. And so this was 1989. and the big earthquake happened up there. I was up there during that earthquake, and it was really difficult. I was actually down in Oakland when the earthquake hit, and we had ran to shelter ourselves from anything that might be falling. So a few days later, my husband, now former husband, but he was in the military and he had to leave for a few days. Him and his unit were helping to dig out the Nimitz overpass that had collapsed, and we were trying to, do search and rescue and stuff like that. But I had gone with a couple of girlfriends of mine, and I did not like the Ouija board. Well, they're all sitting around and they're like, "Oh, well, let's do the Ouija board. But we don't have a Ouija board, so let's just make it with paper, and we'll do that. We'll just get a glass to work as the planchette." And so they did that, and I just sat back. I wanted nothing to do with it. And I'm honestly kind of being a little flippant, because one of the girls is like, "Well, let's see if we can contact, I'm not going to remember the name. Let's say John. I don't know. My friend of mine, she talks with this spirit named John, and let's see if we can contact John, and I'm just sitting back going, uh-huh, sure, okay. This is ridiculous. So I am being very flippant, and they're doing the Ouija board. I'm not doing it. Actually, I mean, I'm standing around, but I'm not going to touch it. And it starts moving, and all of it just extremely fast. And I know the girls didn't do it. It started spelling out, it started putting letters out, and somebody's writing them down, and then they all just kind of stopped and looked up. And like I said, I'm being very flippant. I'm being a little kind of aggressive to whatever's there. I'm like, uh-huh, sure, John. And it says, "Drive to hell, Robin."
Oh, wow.
And I'm probably about a 45-minute drive to where my house is that I had to go home with later on. And I'm like, okay, I'm going home now.
Yeah.
I made it home safely, thankfully.
Yeah.
So it was very weird, and silly me, I did try a Ouija board again at the age of 27 for like 2 minutes. Me and one of my husband's friends, and my husband was, he and I were just dating, but he was deployed, and my current husband. And so me and one of his friends are sitting around, and we're trying to find him a girlfriend. And so we're doing the Ouija board, and all of a sudden it starts pointing out a couple of letters, and it went to Z and O, and I immediately said, "We're done." I don't know why. I've never I don't know why. I immediately got a thought like, "Do not continue this." And that was the last time. So that was, 27 years ago. Yeah, 27 years ago. I won't touch another one.
Yeah.
Nothing has happened since then, but it's kind of odd though, because it started with ZO. And then I would say maybe a year or two ago, I spoke with, no, I'm sorry, I didn't speak with, I heard one of Tony Merkel's podcasts, and he talked about that Zozo.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm like, oh, I never heard of that before. And so I thought, well, gosh, could that have been ZO?
Yeah.
Because as soon as it said ZO, I had never heard of anything like that. Because back then I didn't really read too much about um, paranormal things, spiritual things. So I just had this immediately thought, like, stop this right now. Don't go any further. So that was my foyer into Ouija boards. Tried it 3 times, never going to touch them again.
Yeah.
Have no desire. So it has been really difficult. At least with that first one when I was 13, or the first time I tried it when I was 12, and what had transpired after that at the age of 13. So that was really difficult. But that's the Ouija board
Yeah.
things.
Now and I'm sorry that you went through that at such a young age. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how these entities, how they know that is going to happen, or how they
Yeah.
um it's very weird how, I mean, I've realized that they're, whatever that is on the other side is probably
Mm-hmm.
ancient, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't, I don't have I have no clue how that works, but I know that it does open a door.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I've had a few Ouija board experiences, especially when I was younger too. But
Mm-hmm.
my last experience, I was not playing the Ouija board, but I was working at a state park, and I was I was on like a maintenance crew, you know, and I'm driving through the park, and I live in southern West Virginia, which is known for high strangeness.
Mm-hmm.
And there's young people and older people that all they there's a lot of coven like witchcraft kind of stuff that goes on. It's
Mm-hmm.
not really greatly talked about, but I know it happens. I know people that are in these kind of groups. But I'm driving down the road in the park, and on the side of the road, I see a box. So I pull off to clean it up, and it's a Ouija board that's been left on like in a parking area in the box. Looks like it's pretty much brand new. And
Wow.
I get it and I throw it in the back of the maintenance truck to throw it away. And I go, we had a it's West Virginia. We had a burn pit area
Mm-hmm.
in the park. I'm getting some feedback. I can hear myself talking through your side. Um,
Oh, I don't hear anything odd on mine.
okay. Is your volume turned way up or anything?
It should it be up? I mean,
If you can turn it just where just a little bit lower, maybe that's what it is, because I don't know. That's kind of weird. As long as you can still hear me, I don't want.
oh, I can still hear you.
Okay. Um, that's odd. I was like, come on, don't be something else talking. But I take this Ouija board and I take it to the burn pit, and you know I'm a bigger guy, and I was in better shape then because I was working with my hands all the time. But I went to tear that Ouija board so I could cut it, you know, tear it into pieces and throw it in the burn
Mm-hmm.
pile, and I couldn't get it to tear. Like
Oh,
there's
wow.
nothing I could do to get this thing to, like, I put it over my leg. I could not get it to break or tear at all. And I just thought that was really weird. So I threw it in the burn pile, and I left it there for like a week or so until it rained on it enough to where it got softened up and I was able to tear it up.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, I could not make myself throw that planchette away. Like
Oh.
I put it in my personal vehicle and I drove around with it for probably months, and it was just like some kind of pull, you know. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that was, but there was some experiences when I was young, and my mom had a crazy Ouija board experience when she was young too, like a teenage girl, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I say all that to say there's something about those things. I think it is
Absolutely.
it's definitely a conduit for evil, and it don't matter if you buy it from Parker Brothers or if you make one
Mm-hmm.
yourself
Yep.
or what. It's our intention, you know. And I'm very grateful you got away from it, and I'm very grateful that you come to
Mm-hmm.
realize that it was not your fault. And I'm sorry for the tragic, you know, past.
Yeah, it was difficult. Like I said, for the first, couple of years, because I thought it was my fault.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, going to church and going to Bible camp, my, I guess, experience with that was just kind of a basic level of Bible.
Yep.
I didn't really get deeper. I have to say that, even my husband and I going to church, a few years ago every Sunday. Well, I would say that was probably not more than a few years ago. That was over 20 years ago. That was still almost like a basic level. It wasn't until the last, I think, year and a half with me listening to the confessionals and I think your podcast. And then I think there's another gentleman named Joel who works with Tony
Mm-hmm.
that I've learned more. Like, I had no idea what Nephilim were. I had no idea really what demons were. When people, I have heard people say, oh, aliens are demons. And I'm like, that's retarded. I mean, that was my thought. I'm like, that's not true. Aliens are just other beings from other, worlds that came here. my thought now, because of my experiences, I'm not saying that I've had experiences with aliens, I've had experiences with things. I do believe they are demonic.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I do too.
But you know, that's the thing is my experience with church has, they don't really delve into this stuff. They don't talk about the Nephilim, the demonic forces. They don't talk about any of the other stuff. And I literally know less than 1% of any of it. I'm trying to learn more.
Yeah,
But it is difficult because there's a lot to learn, but it's so different from what the average person's taught, the
yes,
average
it
person's
is.
experience. There is a lot more. And so it is quite, it's entertaining at times, but it's also exhausting,
Yeah,
but it's exhilarating. It's a lot of stuff.
yeah, yeah. It
So,
really is. And
but
and you're right. You'll be hard pressed to find a church that
mhm,
openly discusses these kind of things. And
yes.
I'm very blessed in the fact that I'm I've been a deacon at our church for almost 6 months now, and
Okay.
our our pastor for the last couple of years has let me teach like once a month, and so I get to expose our church to to all of that side, and that's what I've
Good.
done for 2 years. I've taught on spiritual warfare, and sometimes it sticks. Sometimes I get the deer in the headlights kind of look,
Mm-hmm.
but regardless, I feel like it's what I'm supposed to be talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, you're not going to hear these things. You're not going to hear about the what happened to the Nephilim after the flood
Mm-hmm.
and all that. It's very interesting. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's exhausting.
I had no idea even what Nephilim were.
Yeah.
I really didn't, So it was, but I've been learning a lot more lately. I would say the last year and a half. More so, I think, since I've moved into this house. We moved here to Missouri just over 3 years ago. I swore I never wanted to live in the Midwest again. I moved away from Minnesota in 1989 and I said never again. And I've always lived on the coasts, either West Coast, Hawaii, or the East Coast. And I was like, no, I don't ever want to move to the Midwest again. And then a little over 3 years ago, my husband's like, oh, look at that. I got a job in Missouri. I'm like, oh, okay. And I only said yes to it because we're only about 2 hours away from our oldest son and the grandkids.
That helps.
So I'm like, all right, fine, I'll relent.
Okay.
But yeah, so there was a lot of cajoling to get me here. Um,
I would imagine.
but it's fine. But since we moved here, there's just been this house, and I honestly recently told my husband, I broke down a little bit a few nights ago, and I said, it's not this house. I don't think what I'm experiencing is in this house. I think it's my relationship with God. I'm trying to strengthen it, and and I didn't know what spiritual warfare was until just recently.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what's happening because it's our first morning here. I went to well, maybe should I not, I've got so much stuff I'm skipping through. If I want to go back to some stuff. Well, I will go back. So there is one at 16 years old. I was 16, so I will get to this house by the time, by the end of this podcast. But so when I was 16 years old, I lived in Minnesota, and I'm laying in bed, and it's always been very difficult for me to fall asleep. But I'm laying in bed, and I've got my eyes closed. I can hear my mom and one of her girlfriends downstairs, and they're playing. I don't know where he wasn't my stepdad because they weren't married, but he is more like a father figure to me from the time I was like 6. And so I don't know where he was at, but my mom and her girlfriend, they were downstairs. They're playing dominoes. They're something on TV. I can hear them. And I'm laying in bed and I can't move. And I'm awake. I cannot move. I'm on my back But I hear them downstairs, talking and having fun. And then, but I also hear a bunch of men talk. They're deep voices, so I'm assuming it's men. I don't know what they're saying. I would say, I don't know, a handful of men. Very, very low talk, talking. I don't know what they're saying because it's almost kind of muffled and I can't move. Absolutely cannot move. And I'm trying to yell for my mom and I'm like, mom. And I finally get mom out. And as soon as I do, I can start moving and I sit up and I kind of look around my bedroom and I don't see anything. And I'm like, okay, and I do tend to do that a lot. I'm like, all right, it was all in my head. I'm going to go back down or try to go back down to sleep. So I'm laying there and it happens again. And I hear the voices again, but I hear she's difficult. And
Oh,
I'm like, and I'm trying to do it again. Mom, mom. And finally I get it out and I'm like, I'm just getting up and I'm going downstairs. So I did that. I went up and I went downstairs and sat with my mom and her friend while they played dominoes and that was it. So that was my first experience, I would say, with what you want to call sleep paralysis. I
yeah.
wasn't asleep, I was awake because I could hear everything that's going on. I had literally just closed my eyes and then became essentially paralyzed. So, that was very jarring to me. That was the first time I was 16 years old. And so, but I do remember I would say maybe a couple of months later, I had a dream. And what I had always just thought it was a dream until about 2 years ago when I saw a picture. And I thought that's exactly what I dreamt of. And so it was a dream because I've had this dream 3 times. So the first time I was 16 and in my dream I wake up and I'm in a bedroom because it's not my bedroom because I'm on a very big bed. I'm I'm nothing weird is well, weird whatever, but nothing, I guess, sexual is happening. um but I look up and I see this man kind of like on top of me, but I can only see from his like waist up and he's bare chested, but he's got these horns up, but the whole room is like red. And I see these dark cloaked figures on either end of the bed, and they're just kind of looking on the bed. And he's up above, and in my dream, I'm kind of freaking out. I'm like, what is this? And I've always had kind of odd dreams that always sometimes felt more real than anything, and this felt very real. But I was able to wake myself out of it, and I'm fine. So that was 16. I had the exact same dream again. I'm going to say maybe 20, 24, 25, 26 years old. The exact same dream, nothing different. And then I had it one more time at the age of, I'm going to say, because I have to try to figure out like where I lived at the time. I remember, I'm going to say 31. I had the exact same dream. Everything was the same. And I just remember looking up and I said, you will never have me. And I have never had that dream again.
Wow.
Now, I've always just thought it was a dream. It's just a dream. It felt real, but I never gave it much thought until I would say maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I was watching, I don't even know if it was Tony Merkel's podcast that might have had some visuals or if it was on another podcast, a picture of what I think they said was a oh, what do you call those? There's one for a man and one for a woman.
It's an incubus.
Yes, that. And it was somebody had created a picture. I don't know if they used AI to create the picture. I'm like, that was it. That is exactly what I saw. So in my dream, I always kind of thought, or all these years, I always thought, oh, I had a dream of the devil, and I just thought, oh, it was the devil. But somebody had put that image up, and I thought, well, that's exactly what I saw. I remember it.
Wow.
So, and I'd never had that dream ever again from that time when I said, you will never have me. And I guess I was being difficult again.
Thank the Lord.
Yeah. But so it has been very odd when I lived. So I lived in Washington. I have lived in like 8 states in this country. So I've lived all over. We moved a lot, as I said earlier. Um, when I lived in Washington, I joined a group, an online group through this one website. I'm not gonna name the name of the website. So this was in 2009, I think. And one of the ladies that was kind of in the group, she did readings. And so I was like, well, I'd like to have a reading. And she said, she gave me this reading, gave me a bunch of information that was spot on, which was quite odd. I wasn't even on Facebook. I didn't have Facebook at that time, nothing like that. And she said, you and your children are protected. You will be attacked, but you are protected. Don't worry about that. And your oldest son has a contract to fight evil. And so my oldest son, him and his wife they're very religious. They love going to church. They've been to church. They're not going right now only because thankfully they finally realized that the pastor, I do not believe, is a man of God. I knew that from the
Mhm.
second I met that man. But they absolutely love God, and my son has said that he has actually heard God's voice speak to him. And I don't know all the experiences with that, but he has had other experiences being, he's called me once. He got back from the Marines. He was in Okinawa, got back to it, him and a buddy of his got an apartment. He calls me late one evening and he's like, Mom, and he's freaking out. And I hear him and his friend in the background. It's just very chaotic. And he's like, I need so and so's phone number. I need to call her. We have his best friend's mother is a medium. So, he's like, I need to talk to her. I need her phone number. And I'm like, well, what's going on? And he says, there's stuff happening in my apartment. Things are being thrown at him. He goes, there goes my lighter, because he's a smoker. He was a smoker at the time. And he's like, my lighter's being thrown at me. Things in my bedroom are being thrown at me. Him and his roommate. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. And I'm like, are you sure you boys aren't doing some weird stuff? He's like, no, Mom, I'm like, okay. So that was, and that kind of brought it back to me because this is years later than when I heard that your son has, a contract to fight evil. And I do believe that he is, got one of God's warriors. I do believe that with my oldest son. He definitely is. Um, so like I said, I've had that dream, but it is just a lot of odd stuff. I've had 3 readings. I went with my son one time. We lived in South Carolina. He's like, well, I want to go get a reading. And so we went to some metaphysical shop. And now at that time, I wasn't really, I've always believed in Jesus. I've always believed in God, but I wasn't very, I guess, religious. I was buying some witchcraft books. I would buy stuff. I never actually did anything with them.
Right.
It was kind of weird. I would get all this stuff. I would buy the candles and I would buy the books and I would do all this stuff, but I would buy the little gem thing that you hang on a string and you use it up and use it kind of I can't remember the name of it.
A
I never
pendulum.
actually, yes, that's it, pendulum. I didn't, but I never actually used any of this stuff. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'll buy it. But him and I had gone to, or he wanted a reading, and we get there, we sit down, and she says, so what can I do for you? And he's like, well, I kind of want a reading. And she says, well, why? Your mom's more powerful than I am. And I'm like, I don't know what the heck she's talking about. She's just trying to, butter us up. I don't know why. It only costs $25 and that's all you're getting from me. So I'm not giving any more. So it was just kind of odd that she said that. And it's not the first time that anybody has ever said that. And so it was just very curious. But she said, so the first reading that I'd had when I think 2008, 2009, she said, oh, and she talked also about a past life. And she said I was a specific person in a past life. And I thought, well, that's funny. I don't believe that because I'm like, that's just kind of odd to me. Well, then in 2000, I would say, what is that? 2012, when my son and I went for a reading, that woman said the same thing. You were this person in a past life. And I'm like, okay, sure. Do you tell a lot of people this, a lot of women this? And
Okay, who is the person?
so
I gotta know.
yeah, so it was a little, it was odd. And then so that's over with. And then so that was, what did I say, 2013, 2012, 2013, because I'm trying to think of when we moved back to Washington. Like I said, we moved back and forth quite a lot. Um, I'd had a reading back, I would say 2018, but that was when I lived in Arizona. And that person again said I was this specific person. So I've had three people tell me that I am this specific person. And they've also, and but they went a little bit more. They said, oh, well, you're also these other things, these other people, not specific names, but this other type of person a lot in a past life. So I've been told that I've been a nun many times in my life. And I'm like, well, that might explain some things. But, it was very curious. So I couldn't understand why I've had three people tell me that I've been a specific person. And the same, they've all said the same person. I don't believe it because I just can't. It's a very prominent figure. And I can't see how I could have, if you even believe it. Like I said, at this point in my life, I think anything's possible. I'm not going to say I don't believe it. I'm not going to say I absolutely do believe it. Whatever. There may be other people out there that claim the same thing. So, and that person is the Virgin Mary.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm like, I don't see any correlation. None. I mean, but I've also been told I've been a man. And so, a man, like a judge. I've been I can see that one though. I can see that I've been a male judge before. So it has been very curious. But a couple of years ago, I had a reading from this one lady. My mom was very, very sick, and she was towards the end of her life. And my daughter had found this one woman on Facebook, and a friend of hers had had this reading with this lady, and this lady was phenomenal. And so I thought, okay, I'll donate my money and let her give me. Her reading was great. I mean, it was spot on, and there's no way there are things on in it that she could have known, because some of the stuff that she talked about were never on Facebook, were never on anything like that. So I couldn't quite understand. But there was one thing. I've I suffer with some autoimmune issues which cause a lot of widespread pain. And so I've tried different, acupuncture, a lot of different modalities to help with the pain. Somebody said, well, try Reiki. And I'm like, well, I've heard of Reiki. I know what it is. I've heard of it. I've looked it up. I've never had it. So I did try it through this one lady who did the reading. She had kind of a group of people she worked with. So, and it was supposed to be a long distance. So she's wherever she's at, and then I'm here at my home, laying on my bed, relaxing, while she's essentially doing her, long distance Reiki healing. And I would say probably about 30 minutes into it, I start hearing a man's voice. And I'm all alone. Nobody's in the house. And I start hearing a man's voice. I don't know what they're saying. I'm just hearing a man's voice. And but I'm just, laying there. I'm assuming that there's just somebody on her end that, maybe had walked in and talked, to her or whatever. Anyways, while we're done, she's, and I said, so, how'd it go? I'm curious. She says, well, she goes, I've only had this happen one time before. I'm like, oh God, what? She says, well, are you sure you're not a Reiki master? No, this is the first time I've ever had a Reiki healing before.
Right.
Because I'll try anything once, you know. And she says, well, I've only ever had this happen before. She goes, I could not do anything for you. I'm like, well, geez, Louise, you know, there's my $35 that you couldn't. She goes, but I've only had this happen one time before because I was working on another Reiki master. Are you sure you're not a Reiki master? I'm like, nope, nope, not at all. So clearly, I don't know if it's a, you know, it kind of goes along with that same thing with the other person that says, you know, your mom's powerful. I don't know I am because I don't do anything. I don't practice anything. I just do a lot of praying. That's all I do. Um, so it was just very curious to me why she would say that. And I just thought, well, you know, I didn't get any healing, but I did ask her, I said, hey, did a man come in while we were doing this? She goes, no. I said, okay, because I was hearing a man's voice. And she said, you know, no, there wasn't anything. I don't know what that was. So I don't know if I was just being taken advantage of. Could have been. That might happen a lot. Who knows? But that was kind of different. I was really kind of hoping that might help with the pain,
Yeah.
but you know, it didn't. So, you know, that's just that experience. But yeah.
I'm hearing there's like a thread weaving through this whole thing. Um, this energy bubble that you felt like you were contained within when you were a little
Mhm,
kid. These, and for lack of a better term or more appropriate term, these men in black that come into your kindergarten class,
mhm,
and say that you're difficult, and then
mhm,
you hear this throughout your life. She's difficult.
mhm,
She's difficult, and um, dabbling or at least exploring into a little bit of witchcraft. Um, this draw to talk to the other side
mhm,
or to have these readings.
mhm.
Um, have you had past life regression done at all?
I've never had that done. Um, well, not a regression like a hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just cannot find it in my heart to spend $250
Right.
on something like that. I have had with that one lady on the Facebook thing, I have asked her, and she did say, I have had her, she came back with one that I was a young boy in World War II, a young Jewish boy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that might explain my issues with in this room of showers,
Right.
you know, and kind of having some anxiety. I'm not positive about that, but no, I've never had a past life regression done. It's kind of hard because on one hand I believe it, on the other hand I'm like, well, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just there's a lot of like with the incubus dream and it looking so demonic, so satanic.
Mm-hmm.
Short-term memory loss, and I know that's been credited um, to medications that you've had to take.
Mm-hmm.
The whole body pains. It sounds like, and I don't mean this in a scary way or anything negative,
Mm-hmm.
but it sounds like there's an attachment almost,
Mm-hmm.
and something that's trying to turn you that direction, um, because it's very alluring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, as opposed to going toward, Jesus.
Yes.
Even so far as them to say that you yourself were the Virgin Mary.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this. uh it goes into like that new age. I I
Yes.
I am kind of person. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And um, I'm gonna and I don't. I'm just trying to understand. I'm trying to find what the theme is because everything seems. I think everything in life is connected. Um, did your mom? You said she was a hippie. Did she? My mom says she's a hippie too. Did she get into any kind of witchcraft or
No,
anything
no,
like
my
that?
mom didn't. She absolutely did not. She just unfortunately self-medicated with a lot of marijuana my
Yeah.
entire childhood.
Yeah.
She really didn't get into anything out of the ordinary. I know at like age 5, 6 years old, she did try belly dancing at one point, but that was, it was, she just wasn't interested, or at least she didn't show that she was interested in anything. We didn't have anything like that around the house. We
Yeah.
didn't even have a Ouija board in our house. It was just, like I said, the first one I ever had was this house that we'd gone to that were owned by like some family friends.
Yeah.
So I know that my mom, one of her uncles, her he apparently was a very big medium back in the 60s in California, up in like San Francisco area and Southern California area. And he made some, from what I understand, he made some pretty good money
Sure.
doing these parties where people would get together and do seances and stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing a story about, they were at my grandparents' house one night, and my mom and her brothers or her other siblings and stuff, because there was 9 of them in the family, and my great uncle would facilitate this seance, and something picked one of my uncles up and just threw him against the wall. Now my great uncle didn't stop at that point, but I did hear that I think it was the early 80s, maybe late 70s. He actually stopped all of that, became a Christian, stopped all of it, because he woke up one night, saw a figure in his doorway, and would not let him pass, would not let him leave. And something happened. I don't know exactly what it was, but from then on, he gave all of that up.
Yeah.
And he just became a Christian and left all of that behind.
Yeah.
So that was my mom's, I think that might have been the only seance she's ever had, was when she was 14, 15 years old.
Right. Um,
Hmm.
have you ever heard of a familial spirit? Not
Yes,
familiar, but familial,
yes.
like a family spirit?
Well, yes, I have a best friend that I've had for over 30 years. I met her when I was about 20, 22, and she is sensitive. And she's about 9 years older than me. And she did tell me that she described a man that's around me. And so I'm like, I don't know who this is, because a lot of times now, I grew up in a house with cigarette smoke.
Hmm.
I've never smoked. I don't have, and my husband doesn't smoke. We don't have that. But many times over the course of the last few decades, I will get like a whiff of cigarette smoke. Well, so she's like, well, there's this man, and she described him. And I remember quite a few years ago, I asked my mom, I said, hey mom, do you know of who this might be? And she says, oh yeah, that I think that might be Uncle Bob. And I'm like, okay, because that's the only person she knows that had that wore suspenders. And she said he died on her 13th birthday. He was her favorite, or she was his favorite niece, or something along that lines. So I've been told that Uncle Bob um, is around at times, but I don't know. I've never known him. Obviously, he passed away long before I was born.
Yeah. That's an odd connection to at 13th birthdays
Yes.
and loss. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, I don't know. I'm not trying to stretch too far. I'm not trying to reach too deep. Um, but it sounds like there might be an attachment. And that's why because the way these mediums work, they're not connecting with people that have went to heaven or
Mm-hmm.
into what wherever um they may be at. They usually work with spirits, with
Mm-hmm.
demonic entities that can tell you all about you, that they've been around you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They can be around for generations,
Could
and
be.
so they'll know everything. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I just feel like, especially with these dreams and stuff too, it's like something's trying to convert you.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, thank the Lord that you are difficult. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Uh,
am. I mean, I've always had, a lot of dreams. I've always had very vivid dreams. I've always had very lucid dreams as well. A lot, like a lot of times I know when I'm dreaming. Now, mind you, as I'm older, it's just more difficult to do that. But
yeah,
when I was younger, in my teens, I could lucid dream a lot. And I guess what you might want to consider, um, what is that called? Astral projection.
yeah.
I do believe I've experienced that quite a few times. I do have, so I went to school, I was in, I think, 10th grade, and there was this one classmate of mine, and I don't know if he had some developmental disabilities beforehand, but he did something happen. I think he got hit by a train or something. So I don't know if he was developmentally delayed or disability before the train accident, or if that happened afterwards. But he was a nice kid, my age. And I remember one day going into school, and he's like, "Hi, Robin." I'm like, "Oh, hi, Matt." And he says, "I saw you last night." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he says, "Yeah, I came to your house and I walked into your front door and I walked past your mom and dad sitting on the living room couch and while they were watching TV, and I went up to your bedroom and I saw you flying." And I'm like, "Oh." Well, it just so, and I was kind of taken aback because that the night before, I did have, I guess at that time, I didn't know what astral projection was at, 16 years old. I just thought it was a dream. But I had a dream that I had flown out of my body. I went through the ceiling, and I was just up in the air above the earth. I could look down on the earth, and then all of a sudden I felt like this pull on my like belly button, and it like almost like a bungee cord, and it just pulled me right back.
Wow.
And so when he said, "I saw you flying in the sky," I was like, "Okay, that's a little weird." I'm like, "Okay, Matt, that's nice. Okay, great." And that was it. I didn't press him for any more details or anything. I thought, "Okay, you're a little weird. I think I'm a little weird. I don't know what's going on. I don't want to go any further with this."
Yeah.
So it was very different. But I do remember always having, lucid dreams. I remember one time I would have nightmares. I don't remember what the nightmares were. It's been so long, but I remember back in the 80s, the movie called Dreamscape came out with Dennis Quaid, and where he can go into dreams, and he could, if there was something bad, some type of monster in a dream, he could make himself into something even worse than what that monster was to fight that monster. And so I remember thinking after I saw that movie, and so this, I'm going to say this was like maybe 1985, 86. I saw this. I think that's right around the time it was. And I remember going, "Oh, I wonder if I could do that." And so I had the nightmare, and I don't even remember what the nightmare is now, but I do remember morphing my body into something that was more scary than whatever that thing was that was scaring me.
Wow.
And I just remember waking up going, "Wow, that was kind of cool." You know, um,
Yeah.
I, I don't think I ever had that bad dream again. And so I've had bad dreams all my life, but I can't ever say that I've had nightmares. Like I've heard my children tell me about some nightmares that they've had, and I'm like, "My gosh, that's kind of scary." Um, like I remember, but as an adult, I lived in Santee, California in 2000. I think we moved there in 2000, 2001. And I woke up one morning and I was like, I was really upset because I had this dream, and it was a nightmare, but I had a dream that I was in a cafeteria of a school, of a high school, and this young boy was shooting up the place. And it was really
Wow.
hard. And I'm trying to get him to stop. And I look at him and I said, "Hey, you need to stop doing this. You are loved." Because I just felt like he wasn't loved. And I walked towards him and he kept shooting, and he kept shooting me in the stomach. And then I just grabbed him because it didn't hurt me. I could feel the shots, but it didn't hurt me. And I just grabbed him and I gave him a hug. Um, well, later that day, we get a call from the school. All the schools in town are locked down. There's a shooting at the high school in town. And yes, a boy had shot up the school. And so the high school, now, thankfully, my children were at the elementary school, but later that day, my daughter was supposed to go to that school because she was in basketball. So
Yeah.
we went to that high school a lot because of basketball practice and stuff. So it was just very curious. I seem to have had a lot of premonition dreams. Right around that time, I had a lot of dreams about airplanes crashing around the year 2000. And you know what happened in 2001?
Wow. Yeah.
Because I mean, we lived in San Diego area, Santee area, and I would have a lot of dreams about being on the highway and driving and looking over and seeing an airplane crash into the ground. And I would say I've had those dreams probably a half a dozen times. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, and I've never had another dream again about plane crashes. And, I hadn't really had a lot of problems. I wouldn't say problems, but a lot of those dreams for all these years until last year. I woke up, and it wasn't a dream though. I woke up about four something in the morning. I've gotten to the point where a lot of people say, "Oh, write down your dreams." Well, if I'm going to get up and I write down my dreams, that's just going to wake me up. I want to go back to sleep. So I just grab my phone, I turn on audio record, and I just like, "Hey, this is my dream. This is what I just dreamt." And I have the recording. And so I woke up about a little after 4 in the morning, and I woke up to the sound of just voices screaming. And I thought, oh gosh, what's going on? And so I do get out of bed and I go in. I thought, well, my son likes to stay up until, after 2 o'clock in the morning, but who knows? He might be up at 4:30 playing his video games, and I might hear him, maybe he's got some audio thing going on in his bedroom. And no, and my husband wasn't here because he's a truck driver and he would be gone, for a whole week, and he doesn't come home until the weekends. But I even went outside in the front door. I said, okay, is there something happening in the neighborhood? Screaming. I'm hearing tons of screaming. Nothing. Nothing's happening. I'm like, all right, I just imagined it. So I go back to sleep. Well, later that afternoon, actually later that, no, I think it was the next morning, I actually read the news, the local news. So the night before, which is the day of my hearing these screams, there was, we have a daycare, like a after school care type daycare thing here in town. And there were some children, I don't know if there were two or three children who were late, their parents were late to come and get them. And so they're in the office, I guess, with the people that work at the school. And the parents showed up. I don't know the full details, but anyways, and I don't know what parent it was, but one of the parents shot and killed the other parent in the parking lot. And
Wow.
I can only assume that when that happened, people in the office are screaming, like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh. So it was just very odd that I woke up at 4 something in the morning hearing all of this screaming, and 12, 13 hours later, something horrendous happened here in town.
Wow. It's almost like
So,
prophetic dreams. Yeah.
well, and that's the thing, is sometimes I've had prophetic dreams. When my great grandmother had passed away, 3 months before she passed away, I had a dream, that we're all at my aunt's house, and grandma comes up with her green station wagon, and she pulls up to the parking, or the curb, and she gets out and she's like, Robin, grab those things in the back of the car. And I open the back of the car and there are three black dresses. Well, 3 months later, she passed away. She's gone. And so I have had some prophetic. I can't say that I can, um, I know what's going to happen. I don't sit here and try to know anything that's happened. And I don't, at the time when things are happening, I don't go, oh my gosh, I wonder what's going to happen. Because I don't really give it too much thought. I just think things are weird. Like, wow, why would I dream about something like that? That's kind of odd. And it's not until the after the fact that I'm like, then I tie it kind of together, if you do kind of want to tie it together.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, to something else I'm entertaining as you're talking about it. Um, are you familiar with spiritual gifts? I don't know what kind of church you attend or anything like that, but
I'm familiar with a lot, like a little touched on a few things here and there, but I do understand some things that what God does want to give to people.
yeah.
It's just that if I have anything, I'm not exactly sure how to use it.
Well, I've heard it said that the enemy will use these spiritual gifts that we have
Hmm.
in a way to, again, use them. I don't mean to make it like it's a comic book or something, but like use your abilities for forces of evil. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
To where you may have these gifts and it be God given, but if they can get you to think that it's from another source, that you won't go towards God with that gift.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so there very well may be something about you that God wants to use,
Hmm.
and it's just you're coming into it,
Hmm.
and all this time that you've known that there's something different. There's just like when people are sensitive, I believe that's kind of like discernment. I
Yes.
think when you go into an area and you can feel there's something wrong there, or you
Yes.
have these dreams and you wake up and it's happening. I think that could be God given,
Hmm.
but if people just don't know or aren't following the Lord, that
Yeah.
they'll think that it's from another source, and maybe that's it. I don't know, but you definitely there's something about you, that's
Yeah. Well,
it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
well, that could very well be. I mean, it would be nice if I knew exactly what, I was supposed to be doing with things. And as I said earlier, I do believe that in a way that there is some type of spiritual warfare or attack happening. Um, so I'm just trying to go through my lists of everything. So, just things that I've experienced all these years. My gosh, there's so much. But I guess we can probably just get to moving into this house.
Okay.
There's a few other little things I think from, I've been on like some what are those ghost tours, ghost hauntings. I've been on one ghost tour with one gentleman from, like, I think it's Ghost Hunters. Went to the Salina Masonic Lodge in Kansas.
Wow.
And one of one of the gentlemen from Ghost Hunters was there. That was really interesting. I have been on quite a few other, if because I was really interested. Right now, I don't know if I'm very interested in those things anymore because I'm just more focused on, God. And I'm like, I don't know if God really wants me to even be in any of those things. Like I don't want to um I don't want to bring anything home with me
Right.
because I've already have stuff happening here in this house. I mean, I've had, things happen throughout my life anyways. So, but like I said, I just started getting more stuff happening here, and I've been trying to strengthen my relationship with God, getting rid of all those other silly things that I was doing before. I've got so many little trinkets that I've purchased. Oh, this has a vampire attached to it. This has a fairy attached to it. I look back on it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I gave these people money for these things. I'm like, I can't believe how just ignorant I was. But the last few years, with listening to a lot of these podcasts and learning more about the Bible and trying to um educate myself a little bit more, I don't want to have anything to do with any of these spirited items
Right.
that are, and that's the thing. I still have those things in my home. So I do need to get them all. I mean, we've moved here. The house is we're renovating. So I still have a lot of stuff still in boxes that I haven't gone through. So I need to open up these boxes and grab everything and get rid of it.
Yes. And don't
Um,
just get rid of it.
oh,
Renounce
I
it when
know.
you
Yes.
get rid of
Well,
it.
and see, that's another thing too, is I never knew. I did not know. It's only until I would say earlier this year, when you say, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus, or the blood of Jesus, I rebuke you. I never knew about that term to do that could protect me. I tell you, I say that every flippin' night,
Good.
every night.
Good.
Because most nights I don't have anything happening here, but so we moved here early August, so 3 years ago. So what's it, 21? We bought the house, we moved here, and it was about 5:30 in the morning. The our first night here was the night before. My husband got up and went to work. And I'm like, oh, it's already, the light's already coming in from, I'm like, oh, I don't need to be up this early. I don't have a job. I need to lay down and go back to sleep.
Right.
So I have a sleep mask, and I put the sleep mask on and I lay back down. And not just a few seconds later, I hear this man's voice come out of my bedroom closet, and it says hot rod. And I'm like, okay. I sit up, take the mask off, and I look at my closet because it's, right on the other opposite wall. It's not a very big closet. It's a walk-in, but it's not very big. And I'm just kind of staring at it. I'm like, what was that? What is that? And then I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, um, all right, maybe. I mean, it's kind of early in the morning. I can't imagine anybody doing any lawn work, but maybe there's somebody walking, because I have a window right by my side of the bed that's kind of close to the neighbor's house. I'm like, man, maybe a gentleman was walking by the door or by my window. Maybe he said it. Maybe he's calling a dog. I don't know. Maybe his dog's name is Hot Rod. I don't know. I'm like, I'm trying to debunk it because I usually do. I don't immediately think, oh my gosh, there's somebody in my closet.
Right.
But so I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm going back to sleep. I love my sleep because I don't sleep very well. So I do try to get it when I can. So I put my sleep mask back on. I lay back down. Not even 30 seconds later, something jumps on my bed. And it was a big one because I have felt for many years after one of our cats passed away, I would feel like it felt like a cat would jump up on the bed like he would do and kind of wander up here. But this was a big jump. And then it ran up to me and it just started nuzzling my neck. Like I felt the dog hair.
Wow.
And it to me, it felt like, when you come into a home and a dog is like, oh my gosh, look at this. There's somebody new. I'm excited. So I didn't feel like I was in danger, like I was scared. It was startling. So I immediately sat up, took my mask off, and I said, this is unacceptable. I don't know why I said that. It was kind of an odd thing to say. I said, this is unacceptable. And I've never felt that again. But I literally felt the dog hair. And so I have, over the last couple of years, I've contacted the previous two owners of this house, and neither of them have had a dog. Now, I don't know. There may have been a renter at some point in between. I don't remember who sold, when they sold the house and stuff, because we had floors uh redone here in the upstairs of the house. And when they ripped out the baseboards and stuff, there was dog hair, but they both say they've never had a dog. And so all I keep thinking of is, okay, maybe there was, a previous owner had a dog named Hot Rod. I don't know, because it happened just within minutes of each other. Hot Rod, and then
Hmm.
a dog jumps on my bed. So that was just quite odd. So I have not experienced that again, thankfully, because that was very jarring. But I have seen my husband. So I've been in the kitchen. I'll get up early in the morning and I'll be cook. I was cooking breakfast, and I always wear headphones. I always got these over the ear headphones because I'm always listening to either a podcast or just music or whatever. and I'm cooking, and I see out of the corner of my eye my husband walking down the hallway, and he goes into the living room over by one of the windows, and I'm like, okay, he's just looking for something, whatever, and I continue with what I'm doing. And then about 5 minutes later, he comes into the kitchen from the hallway, and I go, oh, what were you looking for? And he goes, what do you mean? And I go, well, I just saw you walk over there. He goes, no, I just came out of the bedroom. I'm like, okay, that's quite odd. Didn't think much of it. But my husband hears me call his name a lot. And so I remember we had our son, his wife, and the grandkids here one time, and we're all in the living room. We're all there in the living room. At least my daughter-in-law is. I don't know where I'm at. And my husband, he must have been somewhere. He comes in and he says, yeah, what'd mom want? And my daughter-in-law says, well, what do you mean? He says, well, she just called me. She goes, no, she didn't.
Hmm.
And so my husband hears me call him very frequently. And so that's odd. And I've seen my husband again out of the corner of my eye when he wasn't even home. And so it's just kind of odd. But so in January, my husband for about a year he was he decided to be a truck driver. Not exactly sure why. He was, he's retired over 22 years in the Navy. He retired about 9 years ago as a nuke chief. He's, got his bachelor's in some nuclear nerd something or other and an MBA, but he wants to be a truck driver now. So actually we're going to be going to buy a semi truck this weekend.
Wow.
But so he in January he was gone, he'd be gone for the week, and I'm laying in bed, and I'm laying on my left side, and I feel two hands slip down my back and like pull my underpants out. And I immediately like kind of jerked around, and he's not home. And I'm like, oh no, this isn't happening. And I have not experienced that again. But about a week later, he's home. And so he works his shift right now, his like overnight. He has to leave like at 7 o'clock at night. He doesn't get home until the next morning. So he's gone. But one night he is home, but he can only go to bed with me for a few hours, and then he has to get up because he doesn't want to mess up his schedule. So we're in bed and we're both asleep, but I wake up because I hear him moving around. I hear the bed's kind of rustling, and I hear him get out of bed, and I hear him at the end of the bed. And then I open my eyes and I see him at the door with his hand reached out, and he's got his pajama bottoms on and a shirt on, and he turns and he looks at me and I look at him, and he's got his hand reached out to grab the bedroom door handle, and he had a very solemn look on his face. And I just look at him and I'm like, okay, and I close my eyes and I roll over and I scream because he's in bed with me.
Wow.
And so he kind of wakes up. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, you were just at the bedroom or at the door. And so, I haven't had that happen again. I've seen him one more time, but it wasn't him. So that instance, I saw him perfectly. It was my husband's head, everything about him. I saw him. Now, another time when he wasn't home, I saw a dark figure at the end of my bed that made me scream. And my son came into the bedroom like, is everything okay? And I'm like, yes, I just saw you're not father again.
Right.
It's not your dad, but I saw this thing again and stuff. He's like, oh, okay, is everything all right? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. So I've just had a lot more things happen here. I've seen things at the end of my bed, and I see a lot of it is in my bedroom. Um, as I said, a couple of times I've seen him in the living room. I don't really spend a lot of time in the basement. It's a finished basement. That's where the TV is. I don't really like to go down there too much, not for any specific reason, not like I'm afraid. I just don't. I like my bed. So if I want to watch something, I'll just get my laptop on and I'll watch it on that. So, but I've seen things at the end of the bed. I've seen another the figure but it was almost kind of like that shimmering. If you watch that, what is that? That Predator?
Yep.
I know a lot of people have said that. It's like, something's there, but it's pixelate. It's not, it's kind of blurry pixelated. And it was right there. And I was like, well, I got to throw something at it. So I just grabbed I had my hair up in a ponytail or whatever, and I just ripped it out and I threw the rubber band at it. Of course, it just went right through it, and then it was gone. But that's what I've experienced, and I've all my life. Well, I would say from the time about 12 years old, I hear things. I don't. Well, only since I've moved here have I seen a lot. But all my life, I've always heard odd things in white noise. So, like when I lived in Arizona, we, I'm in bed, and I like to have a fan going at night. So I know that a lot of times I think I'm getting like interference, like radio wave interference. I don't know a whole lot. I'm not technical with that, but I did look it up a little bit, and I think some of it is like motors or something with something going on. It might interfere with like radio waves, radio stations. So one night in Arizona, I'm laying in bed, and it's just loud, and I'm hearing music because it'll run the gamut of music. I'll hear big band music. I'll hear rock music. I'll hear country music. I'm not a big country music fan, but so I'm laying in bed and I hear this music. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to sleep. So I get up and I turned the fan off. I'm like, it's the fan. I'm just getting radio wave interference. I turn the fan off, but I hear it even clearer. But this time, which is the first, because I've never been able to make out the words of the music. I could hear a beat, or if I'm hearing like a voice talking, I could hear the voice. It was clear as day. I recognized it. And it's kind of odd because I actually went on back then when it was called Twitter, and I contacted the person I heard. He's a radio DJ, and it's Spider Harrison from, I think they call it I Love Radio or something like that. He's a radio DJ. His name is Spider Harrison. And I'm like, hey, I heard you last night when there was no radio playing. Like I could hear him. And he made some comment like, oh, I'm glad to have a new listener. And I'm like, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying, but
Mm.
okay. So it was a little odd. I could hear it with the radio off. And I do tend to get that sometimes. But I still like to have and it doesn't happen all the time. And I do believe that sometimes it is the radio interference, radio waves and stuff. However, a few months ago, I started getting voices again. And of course, my immediate reaction is always just to say, in the name of Jesus, I rebuke you. And it went away. And a lot of times it's fine. Sometimes it'll stop, which is kind of weird. Like if it's just radio interference, why is it stopping?
Exactly.
And I'm like, okay, all right, whatever. I got it to go away. But one night, this is a few months back, it went away. And then it came back. And for the first time ever in my life, I felt like I wanted to pick the fan up and go throw it away because I felt like it was antagonizing me. That's just sounding so weird.
No,
Like my
no.
fan is trying to antagonize me. It would come back, and I would say it again, in the name of Jesus, I rebuke you, and it would go away. But a few minutes later, it would come back, and I'd never had that happen. So, like I said, a few nights ago, I kind of broke down with my husband, and I said, you being gone all the time, I feel like I'm being, this is a spiritual attack. I'm dealing with this because he does not hear anything other than my voice sometimes calling him. He doesn't hear anything. He doesn't disbelieve me because I've asked him, I said, do you think I'm crazy? He goes, no. He very much believes in this, that this is
Good.
what's going on. So I'm glad that I have that support with him. I said, because sometimes I think I'm a little crazy, because it's not like I hear weird, voices any other time other than, well, that thing coming from my closet, but it's most of the time it would be in the white noise, in the fan. So but I still like to have the fan. And honestly, if it gets a little too much sometimes, I turn the fan off and I just put earplugs in, just so I don't hear like anything from outside, because I like to have either the white noise or just quiet. If I hear cars going by or dogs barking, I cannot sleep. My sleep is very, very important to me because I don't get a lot of it.
Well, you bring up a good point too. You put your headphones in and you can't hear it.
Yes.
So that means it's not a voice in your head or a
Yes.
sound in your head. It's something
Yep.
from outside.
Yes. Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So it's a little crazy, you know. I mean, I've heard the noises. First time I thought it was a little odd when I was about 12 years old. I heard it. I didn't have a fan sleeping at night when I was that age, but I would hear it coming through the air vent in my bedroom and stuff. I would hear like big band music, and I knew my mom wasn't listening to anything like that. The TV wasn't on, anything like that. So it was just really odd, you know, that I could hear this stuff, and it would go on and off throughout my life, but it has really picked up, I would say, the last 15 years. Hearing it a lot more. Now, mind you, I don't hear it every single night. A lot of nights, thankfully, it's not bothersome. It doesn't bother me. There are some nights when it really does. So I either turn the fan off, put my earplugs in, and I don't hear it, or you know, or I do say, you know, in Jesus's name, I rebuke you, and it stops. So that's always a plus when I'm able to, you know, call on Jesus's help.
Yes, absolutely. I,
Mm-hmm.
I think, um, well, I'll just be flat out with you. Uh, that Ouija board experience, that first one was around 1982 when you were about 12
Yep.
years old.
Mm-hmm.
I think something's been attached, and I feel like it does antagonize and it provokes and
Mm-hmm.
it pesters, and um, I'm sure the case hasn't been
Mm-hmm.
helped a whole lot with trinkets and knickknacks that have
Yes.
attachments allegedly. Uh,
Yes.
have you tried anointing your home?
I have not done that yet. Um, it hasn't gotten, I guess, to the point. I mean, I'm not scared. It is an annoyance. I haven't done that. I have actually recently kind of looked into it to kind of figure out how to do that stuff. I've heard, because I think I was listening to one of your podcasts recently where one of the person you were talking with did mention that they were anointing, like, you know, they do their doorways and their windows and stuff like that. Um, so I have been looking at trying to figure out how to go about doing that. So that is something kind of on my list to do. But as I said, I a lot of these things I don't feel like scared in a way, as somebody said before. I do feel a little protected. I feel annoyed for the most part, startled when some things happen.
Yeah,
I don't feel scared for my life, thankfully, you know. I'm not like freaking out. It is troublesome because it does tend to interfere with my sleep. And as I said many times, I like my sleep. I don't get a lot of it. So if anybody's interrupting my sleep, I get really ticked off.
yeah, yeah, no doubt,
Hmm.
no doubt. This is fascinating. Like these things have happened all through these years, and I really do believe that it's one of like three things, and
Hmm.
I on my end, it's intriguing. On
Hmm.
your end, I'm sure you're annoyed, and but
Hmm.
you cope very well. You're dealing very well with these things, and you're following Christ, so it's not like you're doing anything
Absolutely.
malicious or
Well, there's a
malevolent there.
there's a few other things that have, like I said, a lot of stuff that's happened in this house. Well, there is one thing, you know, that I've had for quite a few years. Like when I talk to my husband, I'm like, oh, the porthole. I call it my porthole. So I've had this for many years. Like when I close my eyes and I'm awake, I close my eyes. I try to explain it to him how it is. When you see that, what is that, James Bond movie, when there's like that circle
Hmm.
and you know you see like a little hit the figure in it and stuff, so that's how I get when I close my eyes, and it's not all the time. when I'll see like I call it my porthole. It's this round circle, and I see something in that circle. So one time many years ago, I think it was probably only maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. Um, I was like, what's my eyes, my eyes are closed and I see this porthole and I see this dark figure, you just like shoulders up, kind of the bust of the person. And it was a man and he turned and he looked at me and looked forward. And I just kind of jumped back, like, oh my God, he saw me looking at him. I didn't quite understand that. So I talked with my husband and he said something like, it could be one of those uh what is that called, remote viewing, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe you saw something you weren't you saw someone or something you weren't supposed to see. And so I'm like, okay, that's a little weird. And so I do, every so often I'll be like, oh my gosh, I had that porthole again, and I'll see certain things in this round circle, whether it be just a scene of something I can't really quite remember. But things started changing though. I don't get the porthole. I'm getting the full picture now. And it happened. So last Christmas, we went to the kids. They're a couple of hours away, and the grandkids were in a church play. And it was oh my gosh, if I can remember, it was kind of a Charles Dickens, The Night Before Christmas. I think. I think that's what it was. That was their play. And I'm like, oh, it's kind of cool. So we get back, we're home, and later that night I start having, it's not the porthole anymore because it's no longer a circle, it's the whole picture. I'm seeing the, almost like a play of Mary and Joseph, not Jesus, because Jesus isn't a baby, he's not even born yet, but and all the figures. It was so weird because I've never had this happen before. it was it was in the little people, the, the little like Fisher Price or Play School little people toys.
Yeah.
I've never had that before. They were toys, and I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
And they were moving around like you're, move. I'm like, I've never experienced that before. It was the story of Mary and Joseph, but in children's toys. And so that was quite odd. And then maybe a month later, I don't even remember what this one was. I started dreaming, but it was in cartoon. And I've always like, dreamt or had visions or whatever you want to call them in color. I know some people say, oh, I only, dream in black and white. Everything's always in color to me. I can see everything in color. This cartoons. And I'm like, so I remember listening recently to something Tony Merkel, somebody, and they were saying that they started having like visions with cartoons. And I thought, oh, somebody else, because I've never had that before.
Yeah.
And that was quite odd. But also earlier this year, probably just a few months ago, I'm trying to think. So this was, oh, I take this back. This was a year ago. So I'm looking at my paper. This is October 17th, 2023. So I was laying in bed. My husband and I were, I wouldn't say going through a rough patch, but I wasn't very happy with him being gone for a whole week, because I'm like, okay, you were in the military for 22 years, the first 17 years of our life, you're deployed for so long. And I'm like, I just want to have a normal life and stuff. Now he becomes a truck driver and he's gone for like a week and he'll come home on the weekends. But so I go to bed at night. I'm like, okay, I'm just trying to tell myself, let me have a nice dream about my husband. And all of a sudden, my eyes are closed and I see this little tiny fire flame, this little flicker of flame, and it's dancing around in my vision. And I'm fully awake, but my eyes are closed and it's dancing around. I'm like, okay, this is a little weird. And then all of a sudden, the flame turns into my husband's face. And I didn't like the look that it had on my husband's face in this flame. And I'm like, and I remember saying out loud, even though my eyes are closed, I said, I don't like this. This is wrong. And as soon as I said that, the flame of his face turned into hundreds. of my faces, just hundreds of them, my face, mouthing exactly what I'm saying. I don't like this. This is wrong. And I was like, oh no, we're done. And I opened my eyes and I didn't go to bed for a little while. I mean, I laid in bed and I looked at stuff on my phone and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go to sleep right now. Because it was just very, very weird. I'd
Yeah.
never had that before. So, it was just very, very different. But, um, I've had so many different things that, I mean, you know, that kind of disturbed me. I'm like, what is that to make my husband's face and then turn into my face?
Right.
And
For
I've never
sure.
had that before. So I'm having a lot of new things happen in this house, things that have never happened before. Um, so and that those are just my experiences, not even. And most recently I had something happen just a couple weekends ago. My husband and I were celebrating our 27th anniversary. We decided to go to Branson, Missouri and rented a little cabin, and it had like two bedrooms upstairs or two beds upstairs, a bed downstairs, and I'm like, well, we'll sleep upstairs and one of the other beds up there. And we were in bed for probably 10 minutes. I'm like, nope, we got to go downstairs, because I started hearing stuff out of the air conditioner that was going in the white noise, and I felt very whatever. We went downstairs and I felt a lot better. So he just kind of goes along with anything.
Yeah.
And those are just my experiences. My one daughter, she's had so many experiences. It's crazy. So my
Those
two
are
little kids have had quite a lot of experiences.
really.
Yes, my one daughter, she's 25 now, almost 26. When she was 16 years old, we lived in Washington, and we're just kind of, sitting in the living room, and all of us, and she's taking a shower, and she comes outside, or she comes out of the bathroom, she's wrapped in a towel and she's looking scared. And I'm like, what's going on? She goes, and she's holding her nose like this. And I said, what's going on? She goes, well, I was in the shower, and she had her radio in the shower, on the counter, playing some music. At that time, Imagine Dragons was a big, we went and saw the concert. They're a great band. But it was playing, and she says, whatever song was playing immediately just stopped, and then started playing another one of the songs. Like, it just stopped halfway through. It wasn't even finished with that one. It just started playing another song. And that song was called Bleeding Out, and she instantly started getting a nosebleed.
Wow.
And so, and she's always been very, very sensitive. When she was born, she was probably my easiest out of the four children. She was my easiest pregnancy. However, when she was born, my husband, he was supposed to be deployed, but his captain let him stay home. They're like, okay, you only got the weekend. If your wife doesn't have the baby, you gotta leave. So she was born, and he had to leave like 5 hours later. But he or so when she came out, I'm like, okay, what's going on? He's not lifting her up. He's not lifting her up. And then finally he does lift her up, and she is just purple. And well, she was born face up, which is not normal. She was born with part of the placenta around her face and the umbilical cord around her neck.
Wow.
And so when he didn't lift her up, it's because he was trying to get the umbilical cord off of her neck. And so I thought, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And I didn't really think too much. I'm just thankful that she's alive and she's with us. And
Yeah.
she'd had, kind of a bruise along her nose for a while. Because I think she may have, like, broke her, like, deviated her septum coming out, because babies aren't usually born face up.
Right.
And so they called it sunny side up. But when she's always very intelligent. She's the only one that did not go to preschool, but yet she's the only one that could read and write at the age of like 4. But I remember when she was 2, and I had asked my older son too. I'm like, hey, at the age of like 3, I'd be like, hey, do you remember being inside mommy's belly? And he's like, yes, it was warm and wet. I'm like, okay, that's all I'm going to get out of him. Well, when she's like 3 years old, we ask her as well. And she immediately just starts crying. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, and I'm like, what's wrong, honey? She goes, well, when I was in there, there was a little black bird that kept telling me to shut up and go to sleep. And I was like, oh, well, everything's okay, it's fine. But then we started noticing other things when we moved to Hawaii when she was 3. Yeah, so when she was 3, we moved to Hawaii, and we had our furniture wasn't in at the time, so we had to borrow they call it aloha furniture. So the housing office will loan you some furniture, some beds and sofa and a coffee table. We never really had a coffee table. I never really cared for one. But they had a coffee table, and my daughter, she just didn't like the coffee table. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And it was made out of that what is it, rattan or bamboo,
Right.
just aloha furniture. And she just didn't like it. And I'm like, she just didn't like to go near it. And I said, well, I don't what's going on. She goes, well, there's this little girl that lives under it, and her daddy is screaming for her, and he already killed everybody else in her family, and he's trying to find her, and she's hiding under the coffee table. And I'm going, oh my gosh, how does she hear about this stuff? Because I really made sure that my kids didn't see a lot of stuff.
Right.
We didn't watch a lot of TV shows that would denote anything of such. She was always just very sensitive in that aspect, and
Well,
so
yeah.
it was just very, very strange. And she could see auras, she saw colors around people. um and so she is, but she doesn't like to talk about any of that. Like I said, I'm like, honey, you could make some money on this stuff. She's very gifted, but I'm like, you could make some money on this. She's like, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Well, you said
So,
she
and
was
she,
born with the placenta over her face, like so she was
yes,
born with a veil.
Dale, yes.
Yeah, I'm sure
And
you've
my
heard
my
that.
and my thought is, with the umbilical cord around her neck, was she born possibly already like on the middle of alive and not alive?
Right.
So I've always kind of thought about that. So because she is more sensitive than the other children, always has been. She's my liberal.
Yeah.
Um, let's just say she didn't vote for who we all wanted to vote for. Um, so she's just always been a little bit more sensitive than everybody else.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And if she ever will come on the show and talk, I would love to hear about some of her experiences. And
I don't know if she would talk about a lot of it. I know that, she's heard a lot of stuff. Um, I think she likes to try to push out a lot. She doesn't like to focus on any of that stuff. She's like, oh, mom, stop,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So I don't know. I'll talk to her. I mean, I know my son, my two middle ones are the ones that are the more sensitive, more artistic, stuff like that.
yeah,
So yeah, and it's only recently that when my son was telling me that he actually heard the voice of God. And he was trying to talk to his sisters and his younger brother, trying to tell them how great God is, because my youngest son, he's like, he doesn't really believe in anything. My youngest daughter, the one I was just speaking with, she's she doesn't believe in anything. I don't know, she may be an atheist, I'm not positive. My oldest daughter, she's like, she believes in a higher spiritual being, but my oldest son, he's like, nope, God's there and I'm following God. And
yeah,
so he's trying to talk to them about some stuff, and he's had some experiences as well.
yeah. Well, I would love to have them on the show anytime, anytime.
Okay.
And
Well,
I
I'll
don't,
I'll absolutely talk to them about it.
that would be great. And I don't mean to cut us short, but I didn't
No,
realize
that's
like
fine.
uh, I did realize I have to go to church. We do a Thursday night service.
Oh my gosh. So what time
It
is,
has
oh wow.
flown by.
You know what? See, I've debated whether or not I wanted to even write in, because I'm like, I don't have enough stuff to talk about that, and nobody would want to listen to any. These are just like little tiny instances, I didn't think that it would take up 2 hours.
Yeah, and this is
Wow.
yeah, this is the best, because this gives me so much
Wow.
to chew on. Like I want you to stay in touch with me. I want you to do it.
Absolutely.
I want you to anoint your home, but I
Yes,
want you to stay in
yes.
touch with me and let me know what's going on and just keep me in the loop.
Absolutely.
And I'll be praying for your husband to stay safe out there, and
I do every
please,
night.
please thank him for his service for me. You know, I'm a vet, and
Okay, great.
I
Thank
I
you.
I did well, it's my honor. You know, I did like 6 years. You know,
Okay.
I extended for 7 more months. You know, so I could make up my
Uh-huh.
mind what I was going to
Yeah.
do, and I got to go to
Yeah.
Guam twice. I was in the Air Force, and
Okay. My youngest son-in-law's in the Air Force. I've got three children in the military right now.
wonderful. I love a
Yeah.
military family. So
Yeah.
that's so wonderful. So thank you for your
Yeah.
service too, because
Thank you.
you're living with the whole thing. You know, you got to go
Yeah.
along with it. So that's a tough job.
It's my pleasure. So it's a lifestyle. It's different.
Yeah, it is, but you're tough.
Mhm.
Well, Robin, I appreciate you so much. And like I said, stay in touch with me. I'm gonna probably not even change clothes. I'm just gonna take off for church.
Oh, great.
And you have a great night and
Thank you.
God bless.
You too. God bless you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good
Bye
night.
bye. Night.